Around 4100 BCE, on the open steppe of what is now Ukraine and Romania, settlements began growing to sizes the ancient world had never seen anywhere on Earth. Not in Mesopotamia, not in the Indus Valley, not in China. Thousands of structures arranged in precise concentric rings, covering hundreds of hectares of rolling plain. These were not villages. They were cities, the largest human settlements on Earth at the time they existed, and every 60 to 80 years, without fail, their inhabitants set them on fire, all of them, simultaneously, deliberately, and then moved a few kilometers away and built new ones in the same concentric ring pattern. For 700 years, this happened, on schedule. Nobody in the modern world understood why. Then ancient DNA entered the debate, and what the genomes revealed wasn't just who these people were. It raised an entire everything they built, the culture responsible Ukrainian reign. They flourished from approximately 5,400 to 2,700 BCE, one of the longest-lived prehistoric cultures in European history. For most of that period, they lived in ordinary Neolithic villages, similar to farming communities across Europe. Then, around 4,100 BCE, everything changed. The settlements exploded in size, not incrementally, explosively. The megasite of Talyanki in central Ukraine covered 450 hectares and contained approximately 2,700 structures. At normal Neolithic population densities, that means somewhere between 10,000 and 15,000 people, at a time when Stonehenge hadn't been started, and the Egyptian pyramids were 800 years in the future. The Ukrainian steppe held cities. Archaeologists first detected them not from the ground, but from the air. Soviet aerial photography in the 1970s and 1980s revealed vast circular patterns pressed into the agricultural fields. Thousands of oval discolorations, arranged in concentric rings, visible only from altitude. Ground excavation confirmed it. Thousands of burned building foundations, their timbers charred into the soil. The burning wasn't accidental. Some structures had been fired at temperatures exceeding 800 degrees Celsius, comparable to a pottery kiln. The Trypillians were not burning their cities because something went wrong. They were burning them on a schedule. For 5 decades, researchers proposed competing explanations. The sanitation hypothesis argued accumulated waste and disease made each site uninhabitable after several generations. The agricultural cycle hypothesis proposed the surrounding farmland was exhausted every few decades, requiring relocation. The cosmological hypothesis argued the burning was ritual sacrifice, a periodic offering of the built environment to spiritual forces. And a fourth hypothesis, more recently proposed, suggested the burning was a deliberate egalitarian reset mechanism, destroy accumulated wealth, prevent the emergence of hereditary elites, start over on equal footing. Then, in 2023, ancient DNA from 118 Trypillian individuals was published in Nature, and the genomic data added a new layer that changed the terms of the entire debate. The DNA showed that early Trypillian individuals carried ancestry consistent with Anatolian Neolithic farmers, the people who had spread agriculture into Europe from the Near East. But individuals from the megasites showed something different. Gene flow from the East. Genetic contributions from populations connected to the Pontic-Caspian steppe, the same vast grassland region from which the later Bronze Age migrations would sweep across all of Europe. This was not expected. The steppe populations are typically understood as the force that eventually dismantled Neolithic European farming cultures, not as contributors to those cultures at their peak. Yet the Trypillian megasites showed genetic mixing with steppe adjacent populations precisely during the period of their greatest scale and ambition. The genetic diversity within the megasites was greater than in the smaller, earlier villages. This is the genomic signature of aggregation. Multiple communities with different ancestries coming together to form a single, large settlement. The megasites were not grown from within. They were assembled. People from different genetic backgrounds converging on the concentric ring settlements for reasons the DNA identifies but cannot explain. The social hypothesis for the burning gains additional weight from one specific genomic finding. Individuals from different residential zones within the megasites showed relatively low genetic differentiation from each other. The people of the inner rings and the outer rings were not genetically distinct. No residential clustering by ancestry. No genomic separation of elite from commoner. The circular ring plan placed every household equidistant from the communal center. The DNA shows no hereditary stratification developing inside these settlements. The fire may have been the mechanism that kept it that way. Every 60 to 80 years, every accumulated material advantage was destroyed. Every building, every storage, every inherited wealth, and the survivors started again on fresh ground, in the same ring layout, equally spaced from a shared center. The Trypillian megasites vanished from the archaeological record by approximately 3,400 BCE. The DNA from populations that inhabited the same territory after 3000 BCE shows massive steppe ancestry. The same demographic wave that reshaped all of European genetics had arrived. Whether the Trypillian cities had already collapsed before that wave, or whether the wave accelerated their end, the genomic data cannot determine. The last megasites were burned, as all the others had been. Whether that final burning was an act of ritual choice or desperate abandonment is unknown. Europe had cities before Rome, before Greece, before the Bronze Age migrations that remade the entire continent. Cities of 15,000 people with sophisticated internal organization, a distinct architectural identity, and a relationship to time and renewal that no other civilization in the ancient world has paralleled. The burning was not failure. For 700 years, it was the system, and the question of why remains the most genuinely open mystery in European prehistory. The scale of the Trypillian burning has to be understood against the backdrop of what was being destroyed. A single Trypillian megasite required years of construction. The structures were not simple, post-hole buildings. They were two-story clay houses with plastered walls, interior hearths, ceramic storage vessels, and decorated surfaces. Experimental archaeology has estimated the construction of a single large Trypillian structure required thousands of hours of labor. A megasite of 2,700 structures represented millions of hours of accumulated investment, and every 60 to 80 years, all of it went up in flames. Deliberately, the temperature records embedded in the soil confirm intentional burning, not accidental fire spread. Structures were fired from inside. Roof timbers collapsed inward. In many cases, ceramic vessels and grinding stones were left in place and burned with the buildings. The Trypillians were not evacuating and then torching empty structures. They were burning fully equipped, fully occupied households. The 2023 Ancient DNA study by Misha Mokhanov and a large international team also resolved a long-standing debate about population continuity across the burning episodes. Were the same families building new sites after destroying old ones? Or was each megasite populated by a different incoming group? The genomic said continuity. Individuals sampled from successive megasites in the same geographic corridor showed genetic continuity. The people burning the cities were the same people building the new ones. This eliminates the hypothesis that the burning events represented conquest. No new population replaced the old. The same genetic community moved a few kilometers, built again in the same ring pattern, and continued for another 60 to 80 years. The ring plan of the megasites has its own logic that becomes clearer when viewed through the lens of the DNA findings. Geomagnetic survey of Nebelivka, one of the most thoroughly documented megasites, revealed that the concentric rings of structures were organized into identifiable neighborhoods. Each neighborhood occupied a section of a ring arc. The analysis by John Chapman at Durham University suggested these neighborhood units may have corresponded to distinct smaller communities that had aggregated into the megasite. Not a city that grew from within, but a city assembled from parts. Communities that had been separate, each with its own social identity, coming together into a shared urban structure while maintaining some internal social boundary. The ring plan, with each household equidistant from the communal center and from the exterior, may have been an architectural solution to the political problem of governing a coalition. Nobody is closer to the center than anyone else. The architecture enforces the equality the DNA suggests was being maintained. The end of the Trypillian megasites coincided with, but did not necessarily result from, the arrival of Yamnaya culture populations from the Pontic steppe after 3000 BCE. The ancient DNA revolution, particularly the landmark 2015 paper, by Haklazarides and colleagues published in Nature showed that Bronze Age Europe was demographically transformed by a massive influx of steppe ancestry. Central Europe's genetic profile changed dramatically within a few centuries. Northern Europe shows 50 to 75% steppe ancestry in Bronze Age individuals. The agricultural populations of the Neolithic, the people who had built the Trypillian civilization, were demographically swamped across most of the continent. What saved Sardinia saved it because it was an island. What happened to the Trypillians is less clear. Their population genetics show some steppe gene flow in the final phases, suggesting contact, not complete replacement. But the megasites stopped being built. The ring plan disappeared. Whether the Trypillians were absorbed, displaced, or simply chose to reorganize their settlement pattern in response to changing conditions is a question the DNA can identify but not resolve. The question of what the Trypillian burning meant to the people doing it remains genuinely open. The hypothesis that it was a ritual act, the sacrifice of the built environment, finds some support in the ethnographic record of later Ukrainian and Eastern European folk tradition, where fire plays a purifying and renewing role in calendrical ceremonies. The burning at the end of a megasite's life cycle might have been understood as a necessary act of completion, the closing of a chapter that made possible the opening of the next one, not destruction, transformation. The new site, built a few kilometers away in the identical ring pattern, was not a retreat from failure. It was a renewal. The continuity the DNA shows in the population moving from site to site is matched by the continuity the archaeology shows in the building plan. The Trypillians built the same type of city, repeatedly not because they couldn't imagine anything better, but because the ring plan was the right plan. It worked. It expressed their values. It encoded their social logic in stone and clay. And every 60 to 80 years, when the accumulated weight of a city's history had grown heavy enough, they burned it clean and built it again. The archaeological site of Nebelivka, excavated in detail by a British-Ukrainian team led by John Chapman and Biserka Gajdarska between 2012 and 2016, has provided the most granular picture yet of how a Trypillian megasite actually functioned. Geomagnetic survey of the entire 238-hectare site revealed approximately 1,500 structures arranged in concentric rings, but within those rings, the distribution was not uniform. Some sectors had higher structure densities than others. Some contained larger, more elaborate buildings. The survey identified what appeared to be assembly buildings, structures significantly larger than typical residences, located at key junctions in the ring system, that Chapman's team interpreted as neighborhood gathering spaces. A city of 10,000 people requires more than houses. It requires places where groups larger than a household can meet, dispute, decide, and coordinate. Nebelivka appears to have had them, distributed through the ring plan, accessible to of the population, and all of them burned, and, like everything else, on schedule. The spatial logic of the Trypillian ring plan also encodes something about collective memory. When a community builds its new city in the same circular pattern as the one it just burned, it is not starting over, it is continuing. The ring plan is the tradition. The ring plan is the social order made visible in architecture. Each new site is simultaneously new and familiar, new ground, familiar form. The community can begin again without losing its identity, because its identity is not the buildings. Its identity is the pattern. The buildings can be burned. The pattern persists in the minds and hands of the people who build the next set, and then the next, and then the next. For 700 years, this is in its own way one of the most remarkable cultural achievements in prehistoric Europe, a civilization that institutionalized renewal, that made the destruction of accumulated material wealth a feature rather than a catastrophe, and that maintained enough social cohesion across 7 centuries of periodic burning to keep rebuilding in the same form. The Trypillians never built anything that outlasted them. What they built instead was a system of building, burning, and rebuilding that outlasted most of the monument-building civilizations of their era.